This clip is brought to you by VegasWinners.com. Get expert sports betting advice from some of the best handicappers in the world. Head on over to VegasWinners.com and win yourself some money.
Business was down, and there was an old, I've heard over the years that it's good for a booker to switch out. Like it can't just be the same guy forever and ever. Amen. So I think like in Memphis, they would do 6 months with Lawler running creative, 6 months with Jarrett running creative, and then switch. And you could usually tell if you were a fan back then, the more over the top, fantastic gimmicks or ideas, that was usually when Lawler was handling it. The more down and dirty traditional, that was probably when it was Jarrett. Do you buy into that creatively you got to have a break?
I think you need new in your creative. And I think that there comes a point where, yeah, you need to churn and you need to have new.
So let's talk about when Dundee came in. You very quickly parroted what I've heard a lot of people say. He hot-shotted the territory. And I think a lot of times fans online, like myself, will sometimes try to understand the language of professional wrestling, but give your explanation of what quote unquote hot-shotting is.
He came in and basically first thing he did, a lot of gimmick matches, and
which was very Memphis of him. That's what they did in Memphis.
Yes. It was a completely different philosophy than how the company had been run up until that point, where you built to a gimmick match. This was like a guy falls out of the ring. Oh, got to put him in a cage next week. But I also think that Dundee's booking was very creative. I thought that Dundee did a hell of a job as a booker because Dundee had things laid out. Dundee did plan in advance, and I thought he had some really good ideas. I just think that he did them way too fast to prove a point, let's get in there, let's get this off its ass. Just by the talent he brought in, the younger talent he brought in, the Rock and Roll Express, the Midnight, the Terry Taylors, that it gave a new paint of coat to the company. And people were now, oh, who's this new guy? Who's this? Who's that? And I always point to the way that the Rock and Roll Express came in and got over, which was absolutely genius, and it was easy to do. We tried to recreate it with the Rockers. Early on, I would just try to tell Vince, man, let them be tag team specialists. That's what they are. Tag team. Together, they can't be beat. Individually, yeah, they can. But together, they can't be beat. And that's how the Rock and Roll were brought in.
Right.
Is, by God, these guys together, they're not the biggest guys in the world, but as a tag team, there's nobody better. And they came in and they beat Volkov and Khrushchev, Barry Darsow, on television. And it was like, what on paper looks like a match that they should be squished like bugs.
Right.
They did tag team. They in and out, double team, in and out, double team. To get them over by beating this huge, unstoppable team, like, holy cow, they're great. Then you bring in another team that's a heel team that are also tag team specialists, but they're heels. And you bring them in to work with, and that was the Midnight Express. And that had never been done. And it was 4 or 5 guys that got along perfectly and could tear the house down every single night. So that was different. You had Duggan, you had DiBiase and Kamala, but just different talent that wasn't always the norm. Yes, some of it was, but Wrestling 2 and Magnum TA was Magnum TA being there to be groomed, and putting TA in a situation is Wrestling 2 being TA's mentor.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I do want to find out, when you said earlier about Dundee, you were, and then he hot shot at the territory. It was almost a negative thing. Like he did too much. He ultimately helped kill the territory of the promotion. You didn't say that, but that was certainly insinuated, and it's been said many times. But then just now you're rattling off all the good things that he did. In hindsight, what should have been done differently in your opinion?
I think that at some point he should have leveled it off a little bit.
So he just did too much.
I think
of the
come
good
in
stuff,
and pop it and then level it off.
And you think
slow it down.
Just carry me through your rationale there. The idea being, if you do all of these crazy, fantastic things every week, eventually you run out of shit to do.
Yes.
So the way to do that is to very rarely do it and just stretch it out.
Yes. But I think that the way that Bill brought in, look, he had an entire new roster that he had to get over.
Here's what I was going with that. It feels like a lot of times, quote unquote, old timers who talk about modern wrestling, they say, oh, they're doing too much. This guy or that guy's doing too much, what have you. And it feels like this is the same thing, except maybe the booking side of things, where you got to get less is more. Should the goal of everybody, working on a program be to, hey, we got to make sure this week's show was better than last week's show? Or do you think that leans into the hot shotting? Ladies and gentlemen, I can't believe this is real, but we not only got a handicapper, but we got the best ever. How are you so good at handicapping these games? 4-0, that's quite a streak already.
Let's talk about every pick I've given this year in the NFL as an example. 23-8. Every pick I've given this year. 4 weeks in the bag, 23-8. There's nobody in the country that can match what I do, but I always make sure, because anybody, Conrad, could make up anything. They could tell you and blow smoke and tell you, oh, I'm the greatest. But I am independently monitored and documented, so nobody could ever question what I say and go, I don't believe it. I send every pick to an independent monitoring and documentation service that has to get the pick before the game goes off and then publishes it after the game goes off so anybody can see what I gave. But this is the best start I've ever had. I've never been this good to start a season. You don't win every week, 4 weeks in a row, everything you put out. It's been the kind of year I've had. So get on a hot streak, because when a guy's on a hot streak like me, you want to ride it. I've always had a talent for picking winners. Never quite as hot as I am right now, but I've always been very good at it. And I think it's because I do more homework than anybody else. The average guy or gal watching this podcast, they don't have time. They have a career. They have jobs. They might read the newspaper or go online and see something, but they don't have time 80 hours a week to study the games. That's what I do. And I have a crew of guys behind me, my consultants, who every week we get together 3 times a week and they throw their ideas at me. I throw my ideas at them. And then I pick the final 5 plays on Saturday and Sunday in college and pro football. I've got a great team behind me too, but we're all doing together hundreds of hours of homework. So you don't have to. It's all at vegaswinners.com.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to vegaswinners.com right now. Let's win some money.
I think it can lean into the hot shotting. And again, you look at this as a perfect example, because it got it so high, but there was nowhere to go after that height. And instead of going down just a little bit, leveling off, and then where you can have your peaks and valleys, it went in the valley and didn't come out.
So Ernie Ladd and Paul Orndorff are going to main event the Superdome show after JYD and in a lights out match where Ladd wins in front of 18,000 people. This is a huge crowd. What was the difference, would you say, at the time between Jim Crockett Promotions, which, is not yet on TBS, Mid-South, and the World Wrestling Federation here in, what is this, 81?
Yeah, again, you're looking at, I don't even know the Mid-South. Jim Crockett was anything more than just a little regional promotion. Same
Right.
thing as Mid-South. And New York was just New York. No one had made any big national moves. The closest thing to a national company that you had was Atlanta, because they had TBS on at 6:05 on Saturday night.
November of 81, it's a main event with JYD and Mike George against Paul Orndorff and Bob Orton Jr. This is a 46-minute match with JYD. It's a different era, is it not?
Yeah, these guys worked. You only had 4 or 5 matches on a card.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.